Welcome, and happy you could join us. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
We go with the screen share. So at this point, of course, we have Balak and Balaam having met each other. And Kathleen had a question about that. She talked about the feast. Now, Kathleen, I need to get a clarification from you. When you say the feast, are you talking about the initial food that Balak offered Balaam and the chieftains? Is that what you're talking about?
Food on the altar. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So making a sacrifice, I mean, we know from other experiences too, that making an offering is like a deep statement of submission and an admission that God really owns everything, that we don't own anything, and that what we have comes from God ultimately. And so I think part of the idea is that making such offering up such sacrifices is an attempt to declare very clearly that we realize that everything that we have ultimately has a divine origin to it. And it's a way of making that connection. There are also other elements too, and that is that we know that sharing a meal with someone is a very lovely act of communication. It's a very I even might want to say an intimate act. There's a level of intimacy in sharing a meal with the other person because it involves acts of generosity and trust and giving time, etc., etc. So that in a way, offering up a sacrifice without any question is understood as, in a way, symbolically sharing a meal with the divine.
Okay.
In fact, our own tables, by making blessings on the Sabbath, singing table hymns and things like that, is a way of making our regular table in our homes in a way symbolic of the offerings and the altar that went on. So that in our homes, at our tables, that also symbolically is an altar.
Okay.
But the blessing, of course, immediately is a way of saying it doesn't really belong to us. So.
Okay, that clears it up. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, good. So here we go. So let me see a place. Oh, yes. In doing some preparation, remember we had that phrase, Vayelech Shefi. Remember? We had that Vayelech Shefi, and Rashi explains it as, he uses the Targum's explanation right up here, that it means alone, solitary. And here we have another interpretation. And I thought you might find these things interesting, because this word Shefi is not a common word. And so trying to translate it and trying to understand it is a challenge. Tanya. So Tanya essentially introduces a rabbinic source that is of Mishnaic origin, meaning it's prior to the recension of the Gemara, of the Babylonian, of the Talmud, and it's of Mishnaic, in other words, around the year prior to the year 200. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, although I'm assuming this is interesting, I always thought Tanya meant that. There is a Rabbi Yochanan who is an Amora. The word Amora refers to a teacher from the time of the Talmud. However, Rabbi Yochanan could also, there might be a Rabbi Yochanan that they're referring to that is actually a different Rabbi Yochanan. But generally speaking, when you see Rabbi Yochanan, it refers to the Rabbi Yochanan is a major player in the Talmud. And in fact, even the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, is attributed to him. I will tell you one other thing, a little technical detail. The term Rabbi, right? If you see the term Rav so-and-so, that refers to a scholar from Babylonia. Scholars from the land of Palestine are referred to as Rabbi. And Palestine, of course, was the name given by the Romans to the land of Israel after they conquered it, because they tried to rub out any memory of self-government, etc., because the Jewish people gave them a lot of trouble. So they didn't even call Jerusalem. They got rid of the name Jerusalem and gave it a different name. And they, of course, instead of it being called Judea, it was now called Palestine. And of course, based on the Philistines who used to live there at one point. So just some historical detail for you. So this is what Rabbi Yochanan says. Balaam chiger beraglo achat haya. It says Balaam was lame in one leg. And how does he know this? Shene'emar vayelech shefi. So it means vayelech means he went shefi, and he's understanding shefi as being, in a halting kind of way, that he was lame in one leg. So that's how he understands it. And of course, this raises questions, the basic question of, gosh, how does he get that? Where does he get that? And this is where our Torah Temimah is very helpful. So he says, milashon, he gets it from the expression, buka da atma, the thigh bone, the shaf miduchte, that has glided from its place. So that's exactly limping, right? He's limping, he's lame in one leg. And this is actually this is a phrase that we find in the Tractate Chulin, page 54b, right? It's Aramaic. Buka da atma, the thigh bone that has glided from its place. And he goes further. This is his own creativity. That is Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein's creativity here. Ve'ulai darish kain. And possibly he interprets in this way, mishum, on account, dichtiv vatilachetz regel Balaam el hakir, because we read how the leg of Balaam was pushed against and pressed against the wall. And who would have made that connection? I have to tell you, until I read this, never occurred to me that connection, and that's so great. Umin az ne'esa chiger, and from that moment on, he was lame. The samach zekan, and he connects, that is Rabbi Yochanan, connects it here, al halashon shefi, with this word shefi. That's this shaf shefi. So a beautiful little piece of Torah Temimah for today, a little jewel for you, a pearl. There's one more that we'll take a look at in a little bit. Let's see, I think, it's another verse, so we'll look at this. Going back into the text, Vayesem Hashem Dvar Befi Balaam. So we did this yesterday, but I'm going to translate it again. So here, and the Lord placed a davar in the mouth of Balaam. So davar can mean work. Ledaber means to speak. In other words, Hashem placed speech, right? A speech in the mouth of Balaam, Vayomer, and he said to Balaam, Shuv el Balak, return to Balak, b'chor tedaber, and speak in this way. So the early commentators are fascinated by this particular phrase here. What is it? How do we understand it? And we're going to see that they take it actually very literally, and yet I believe it has symbolic meaning. Here we are. Vayasem Hashem davar befi Balaam. And Hashem placed something, because davar can also mean a thing, in the mouth of Balaam. Tanya, so here we go. We've got another Tanya early source. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Malach, an angel, that God placed an angel in Balaam's mouth. Rabbi Yonatan Omar, so this is Rabbi Yonatan, not to be confused with Rabbi Yochanan, right? Amar, he said, Chika or Chaka Natan or Chacha Natan letoch piv. He placed a hook into his mouth. So this is understood, this is taken from, this is the reference in Sanhedrin. And again, we have some interpretation on the part of Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein. So he says, so we have this difference of opinion. One says it's a malach, it's an angel, and of course it can be a very small little angel. The point is it's some kind of, a messenger in that sense. The other suggests that it's a thing, right? So Yitpa'er al pi ma shekatuv, this becomes clarified based on what is written by Midrashim, okay, in the Midrashim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Malach yashov lo bigrono. So there it says, an angel sat in his throat. Ratzah levarech, if Balaam wanted to bless, manicho, he would leave him and let him do it. Ratzah lekalel, and if he wanted to curse, bolmo, he would muzzle him. Ve'eno manicho, and he wouldn't allow him to curse. Ve'en devaro ha'amur kan, ela malach, and the reason why his diburo that is said here is only, it can only mean an angel. Shene'emar yishlach dvaro vayirpa'em. So there's a statement that says, I'm not sure if it's in the book of Psalms, that says he sent his word and he healed them. Okay, I believe that's what this would mean here. So I'm not sure that I fully understand his, okay. Because it says he sent his word and healed them. So it's understood as dvaro and davar here as referring to an angel that would be sent, right? Because it's another word. The word for messenger is shaliach, someone you send and heal them. So this is based on this kind of phraseology. Rabbi Eliezer says it's an angel. Rabbi Yonatan Omer, and Rabbi Yonatan says, Masmer shel barzel, an iron nail, natan bigrono, he placed in his throat. Ratzah levarech, if he wanted, he intended to bless, manicho, it would leave him alone, it wouldn't affect him. Ratzah lekalel, however, if he wanted to curse, bolmo, it would muzzle him, ve'eno manicho, and wouldn't allow him to utter a curse. Udvaro ha'amur kan, and with regards to what he says here, this is Rabbi Yonatan, Eino ela masmer shel barzel. In other words, when he talks about this hook, we're talking about a nail. Masmer is a nail, shel barzel, of iron. And now he places it on another verse, Shene'emar, Bechol davar asher, because it talks about the word davar, right? So he's got the davar up here. That's why he associates it with an angel. That Rabbi Eliezer associates it with an angel, and Rabbi Yonatan associates it with a nail, because it says V'chol davar later on, actually in the book of Numbers, where it talks about koshering these utensils that they found after they went and attacked the Moabites, okay, or the Midianites. Kol davar, anything asher yavo ba'esh, which can come into the fire. Here it is, ba'esh, and this is in the Parsha of Matot. Vahu barzel, and what are we referring to here? We're talking about something that can be fired. We're referring to iron, metal. And that's in fact how you kosher metal, essentially, it's called libun, and you make it red hot. And that presumably destroys any absorptions of food that might have occurred into the metal. So that's why it's a way of koshering, something that is capable of withstanding fire. Vezehu inyan pluktatam kan. And this is the essence of their disagreement here, sheba'a bakitzur, which is mentioned briefly. And he says, V'iyein od, he says, see further, Masha Katuv Parsha Haba'a, in the Parsha that is coming. Let's see, Perek Vav, or Pasuk Vav, regarding this would be, I believe, verse 6, Ot Yud Gimel, and it's this would be the Ot here, mentioning Yud Gimel. Unless he's referring here, let me look later on here in Yud Gimel, but I haven't checked that reference, so I can't say for sure what he's referring to here. Pei can mean Perek, but we can't be referring to chapter 6. It doesn't make any sense. We're way beyond chapter 6 in the book of Numbers right now. So going back, thought you might enjoy getting a little bit of a different flavor from this. So let's go back here. Okay, let's see, and check out were we in the middle of a Rashi? No, we did this. We did all of this. Yeah, we got all this. So maybe we didn't get to here, where he was comparing the reason for the 7 altars, goes back to the patriarchs who in total built 7 altars. And he was saying that Balaam was saying he basically merited more because he by himself built 7. And Va'al par va'ayil b'mizbeach, and I offered up a bull and a ram on each altar. For Abraham and Abraham, lo he'ela ela ayil echad, and all he did was offer up 1 ram. So let's go on now. Vayashov, let's see, just want to make sure we're in the right place. Vayishov Elav, and he returned to him. So Balaam returned to Balak. V'hinei nitzav al olato, and behold, he is standing by his offering. Hu v'chol sarei Moav, he and all the chieftains of Moab. Let's keep going here. Vayisa mishalo vayomar, and he took up mishalo, his theme, vayomar, and he said. So this is actually poetry that is coming here. And part of the way we know it's poetry is that you'll see something that is typical of biblical poetry, and that's something that we call parallelism. And that is where you say the same thing in parallel. So here's an example. Min Aram yancheni Balak, from Aram, Balak led me, Melech Moav, king of Moab, Balak Melech Moav. So here we go. Balak, Melech Moav, although this is connected here according to these little things. Mehararei Kedem, from the hills of the east. So hills of the east is parallel to Min Aram. Lecha arali, go, curse for me, Yaakov, Jacob. So here is again an example of parallelism, as you'll see. So go, curse for me, Jacob. Ulecha za'ama Yisrael. Again, lecha, right? Lecha, and go and incite anger against Israel. So Jacob, Israel, parallel. Ara, za'ama, parallel as well. So that's how we know this is a style of Hebrew poetry. Excuse me. So, Ara li Yaakov, go, curse for me Jacob, Ulecha za'ama Yisrael, and go and curse or incite anger, against Israel, divine anger against Israel. Bishnei shmotehem amarlo, or amarle, and it means with both their names. In other words, both the name Yaakov and the name Yisrael. He used both names. Lakalalam. So, sorry, Amarle lakalalam. He said about them to curse them. Shema echad mehem eino muvhak. In case one of them wasn't considered distinctive enough to curse. In other words, if there was any question about identity regarding who he was cursing. Ma ekov, so going on, who can I curse? This kava, ara, za'am, these are all synonyms essentially. How can I curse? Lo kabo el, that which God has not cursed. Uma ezam, and how can I incite anger? Lo za'am Hashem, that which God, the Lord Hashem, has not become angry against. I'm sorry about the misplaced prepositions here, right? So let's take a look at the Rashi on this. Ma ekov, lo kavo el, right? How can I curse that which God has not cursed? So, and this is Bamidbar Rabbah, the Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah. Keshahayu re'uyim lihit kalel, because even when they were worthy, they deserved to be cursed. Lo nit kalalo, he did not curse them. This is such an amazing Rashi here too. Keshehizkir avihim et avonam. So when their ancestor mentioned their iniquity, and this is referring to Jacob in his last days, when he assembled his 12 sons, and he says these words to them, and he mentions regarding Shimon and Levi, it says, Ki ba'apam hargu ish, for in their anger they killed a man. So that's the aveira, the iniquity, the transgression that they committed, that Shimon and Levi committed. Lo kilel ela apam. He didn't curse, he only cursed their anger, right? He doesn't curse them, he curses their anger. Shne'emar, as it states in Genesis chapter 49, arur apam, cursed be their anger. So there's one example of where, while they might have deserved to be cursed, they themselves were not cursed. Keshinichnas avihem b'mirma etzel aviv. Going back even further, when their patriarch entered stealthily, right, or to trick, using trickery or falsehood, etzel aviv, to his dad. And of course, you may be able to figure this one out. We're talking about, remember that story where Isaac wants to bless Esau and Rebekah tells Jacob to go on in, and she puts the goat hair on his arm, the skins on his arm and around his neck, and he fools his father. That's what we're referring to. Well, that's not a nice thing to do, right? Hayara'ui, he deserved lehit kalel. He deserved to be cursed. Ma ne'amar sham. But what is stated there, in chapter 27, Gam Baruch Yeh. So when Esau comes and his father discovers that Jacob had impersonated him, and he tells Esau, he says, amongst other things, he says, he went and he took the blessing, and Gam Baruch Yeh, indeed, he will be blessed. This, of course, is an amazing story. And it raises all kinds of interesting questions, because if one does something if one has no intention, if one is tricked into a business dealing, the answer is there is no business dealing. No business dealing took place because it was done through trickery. And so if Jacob wanted to get a blessing from his father, doing it through trickery wasn't going to work. So the commentators have talked a lot about this particular inconsistency, and there is a suggestion that Isaac actually wanted to bless Jacob, but he was afraid, mortally afraid of Esau, because we know that Esau was a violent person. And so, ultimately, of course, Jacob has to flee from Esau's anger, but this isn't the place, of course, for us to discuss this story, and hopefully we'll get to it at some point and maybe discuss it in greater detail. The Mevarchim Ne'emar. So now we're talking about the part where they talk about the 6 tribes on Har Eval, on Mount Eval, and 6 tribes on Har Grizim. This is once they enter the land. In the book of Deuteronomy, Dvarim Kaf Zayin, Deuteronomy chapter 27, we find this, and that they're sort of formally brought into a blessing or a curse. And it says, so I think it's the Levites have to turn to 6 of the tribes for the blessing. And they say, blessed is the one who does this. And then they have to turn to the other mountaintop where the other 6 tribes are saying, and they say, cursed is the one. Well, that's the point. We'll have to see exactly the language. That's what he's going to look at. So this is a quote, Ela ya'amdu levarech, these ones shall stand for the blessing, et ha'am, they shall stand to bless the people. Okay, so I think we're talking about the Levites possibly, but mekalalim, but when it comes to curse, the ones who are cursed, or at least where the curse is being mentioned, they're not being cursed. They're just, they're being forewarned. But again, it's not that they themselves are going to be cursed. And obviously, if they don't do what these curses are warning against, they're going to be fine and in fact blessed. Okay, so look at the language here. It says, Ela ya'amdu levarech et ha'am. These shall stand to bless the people, right? When it comes to talking about the curses, lo ne'emar, it doesn't say, ve'ela ya'amdu lekalel et ha'am. In other words, it doesn't say, and these shall stand to curse the people. Ella, the language is slightly different. It just says, ve'ela ya'amdu al haklala, and these ones shall stand regarding for the curse. So clearly the first part is talking about the first 6 tribes. They will stand to hear the blessing, okay? And the second 6 tribes are just hearing they're there when they turn and recite the curse. Lo ratza lahaskir alehem. He didn't want to mention with them sham klala. He didn't want to say to curse the people. So it just says the curse. Lo za'am Hashem. God has not, the one who God has not been incited against. And here's several references, Brachot and Sanhedrin. Ani, so he says, Balaam is talking about himself. Ani ein kochi ella, he says, I don't have it in my power to curse or to bless. It's not in my power. Ella sha'ani yodea lechaven hasha'ah, but I know how to determine exactly the moment shehakadosh baruch hu ko'es ba, when God expresses anger. In other words, that there's a certain time of the day, there are certain moments where the divine anger is sufficiently incited, but it is not Balaam who actually is doing this. It's just that when he realizes that this is a moment when divine anger is incited, at that moment he can say, so-and-so is to be cursed. This is Balaam going on and saying, but he hasn't been angry, that is, God has not been angry, kol hayamim halalu, all these days. He hasn't expressed anger. Shebati elecha, that I have come to you. In other words, since you invited me to come to you to do this, God has not been angry. There's been no inciting. Vezehu she'emar, And Rashi says, and this is actually implied in a verse in Micah chapter 6. Ami, Micah says to the people, of course, centuries later, right? My people, Zachor na ma ya'as. Remember what, and it's Balaam, referring to Balaam, the information, the advice, excuse me, that's it. Remember what advice Balaam gave, right? Uma ana oto Balaam, and what Balaam is going on with it, right? This verse in Micah, and what Balaam replied to him, or how Balaam responded, Begomer, etc. Going on with this verse, Lama'an da'at tzidkot Hashem, in order to understand the righteousness of God, God's righteousness. So again, what this story is really about is the degree to which God has blessed and shows love to the Jewish people and protects them. And we'll stop here. So I'm going to see if I can pop in the marking here. And we have one more day, God willing, tomorrow, to take a look at this parsha. Let's go here. We'll take it up here. And this is where we will continue tomorrow. And I'm going to stop the share. And before I stop the recording, is any comments before I close the recording? Okay, so I'll stop the recording right here.